Hello, family and friends. It is the Culture Podcast, and we are back for a good one. Listen, y'all, welcome back. Y'all been rocking with us now for about 2 months, right, Coach G?
Too
And
much, too much now.
yes, man. And we are so excited tonight. We are bringing a voice to social workers and what social work really is. I bet you didn't know this was National Social Work Month, but after today, you're going to remember that March is the month for social workers.
March.
So we're going to go ahead and jump into our intro. We're going to come back in and we're going to make sure that you guys know who our guest for the night is.
I'm writing this, try not to cry. You stabilize my vibe. I'm inspired when you have my eye. My youth was consumed by vain beauty. Little did I know that vanity could masquerade the unruly. Coolly high love time, we reminisce, paint a vivid picture. I should come and lift her. Brethren, I don't want to see the sister get left up, creep by another mister. Patience, no longer taking advantage of your innocence. Genetically superior, I had the vision this. Head ruled up my eye, I'm on my pilgrimage. History richer than the epic of Gilgamesh. We projected the broken worlds, made you a victim. Change the narrative, let it sit at your feet for wisdom. Pride, disrespect, I played my part. Now I apologize, cause deep down it hurt my heart.
Second queens lost in the struggle. Part of the chain
I never get tired of that, man.
gang. I was just about to say that sounds so good as an intro. Like it's beautiful.
It is, man. It's fitting, man, for all the shows that we do with y'all, man.
You did your thug thizzle over there, Coach G, aka Trey G, aka Furious Styles. The modern day MF Doom is on the ones and twos. But anyway, y'all make sure that y'all go ahead and share this video. Make sure you follow us on YouTube. The Floor is Yours Podcast LLC. Make sure you like us on Facebook as well. And Coach G, myself, and Flex, the producer, is here every other Wednesday at 8:00. And we are so excited. So as y'all know, I'm your girl, Luna. We got Flex, the producer, here. We got Coach G. But tonight, I got some special guests, y'all. When I say special guests, I mean these people are dear to my heart. Okay, they are literally dear to my heart. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But I have my best friend, Michael Jones, is in the building. And he does all things ministry and social work. So y'all in for a good treat. And then my line sister in Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Whoop, love y'all. Dr. Davis is in the building tonight as well. And when I tell y'all, she is the whole reason why I made it through my social work program. So the little social worker y'all know today is because these two people, Mike started out as my tutor and Leslie was my role model. So I'm going to give y'all the rings. Tell the people who you are and what you up to. We can start with Mike down there.
My name is Michael Jones. I'm up to a lot. I got my undergrad degree in social work from the Ethlyn R. Strongest School of Social Work in Norfolk State, class of 2013, the best class of social workers. Right now, I'm currently serving as the father-focused community health worker / fatherhood coordinator for Healthy Start Loving Steps. It's a partnership between EVMS and the Virginia Department of Health. The main focus is to make sure that Black and brown moms in Norfolk and Portsmouth have good maternal health outcomes, healthy deliveries, that these babies are born, that they live, that they develop in a proper way, because we know because of systemic racism, that Black and brown moms don't get the best health care in the United States. That too many of them are dying during childbirth, dying after childbirth, that our babies are born underweight. There's a lot of the generational trauma that goes into that, but also current racism, especially being Black and women, and then also sometimes poor because of the communities we live in. So that's the day job. The night job, I'm the director and academic coach of Hampton Roads Legacy Community Outreach Organization, where we do tutoring and mentoring all over the country. At this point, I have students all over in the areas of mathematics, language arts, history, whatnot, ASVAB, SAT, just trying to, represent the green and gold and serving the community. I'm also very much interested in beginning my journey in the social justice ministry. I'm an associate minister, Union United Church of Christ in Norfolk, Virginia. My pastor is Reverend H.J. Morrison. And under his leadership, I'm able to work with a predominantly white church in Virginia Beach, co-facilitating a course on race, on faith and racial equity. And so I'm trying to do my social justice thing. I'm trying to do my mentoring and tutoring thing. And I'm also trying to do the fatherhood thing, working with the fathers of these children, making sure that they have healthy families and healthy outcomes. And so just trying to be of service. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing right
That's
now.
so dope, man. Listen, you alone just dismantled the fact that we are certainly more than CPS. But let me give the read to Dr. Davis. Go ahead and tell the world, sis, what you're up to in the field of social work.
The Dr. Davis.
It's been a long time coming. So hello, everyone. I am Dr. Davis. I received my bachelor's in social work from Norfolk State University, my master's in social work and certification in global social work from Tulane University, and my doctorate in social work from the University of Southern California. What am I up to? I'm up to a lot. So currently my day job, because most social workers have more than one job, my day job is I'm contracted for the government, and I work with the Navy, and I do outpatient therapy for the Navy, as well as clinical assessments, diagnosing, to determine fitness for duty. So if a sailor is fit for full duty or limited duty, as well as I assist with the assessments for med boards, which determines if a sailor can be medically retired, which then in turn determines their disability rating. As well as I do telehealth therapy if a sailor is deployed, and also assist with the determination if they need to be medevac back to the United States. After hours, what do? I'm currently writing 2 books. So I'm excited about that. I'm currently writing 2 books, as well as I am partnering with an organization in New Orleans to work with law enforcement and experienced sex workers on a project that I cannot disclose just yet. But if you know me, you know my specialty is disrupting norms and stepping outside of the box. So I really love working with marginalized communities, populations that people don't think of. I mean, most people don't think about sex worker rights, but that's my thing right there. In harm reduction, reproductive justice, prison reform. I'm not afraid to go against the grain. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. You guys rock, man. You guys rock. I want to make a special shout out to those who are watching us live. We got Dr. Chad out there because he said he a doctor, and I believe you, King. Welcome. Alicia, welcome. We are so excited that you guys are tuning in tonight. So again, I'm Luna. Y'all know me, but tonight I'm gonna put my social work hat on. I am a licensed clinical social worker. Right now, I serve as a director of community-based programs for a local nonprofit. And I'm actually about to transition into full-time entrepreneurship because I want to be able to service the world and provide preventative services to lower the rate of individuals who need any type of mental health services and post-reactionary care. We literally lack, not just in the United States or the world, an in-between between when someone's normal and when someone has a mental health breakdown. There is a space in between that before it gets to the breakdown part, and I want to be the one to fill that gap. I do a lot of things as it relates to trauma. So I am a trauma-informed care clinician. I'm working on my certified complex trauma professional certification. I'm also about to complete my trauma-focused CBT certification. I also work with youth with substance abuse issues, and whatever you name it, I've kind of done it, which is kind of why I wanted to do this podcast tonight so that people can understand that we are more than CPS. I'm going to pass this baton to Coach G because I'm going to let him kind of lead the questions there. And again, to our audience, we see y'all out there. We will do our best intermittently to answer your questions and address your comments.
Peace. First and foremost, salute salute to the three of you all for what you do in social work. And I say that because, and it really will lead us to how we're going to start growing up, especially in marginalized communities. When you say social worker, boogeyman comes to mind. The boogeyman comes to mind. Me and Flex, we actually had a conversation because typically what comes to mind, CPS or social worker, then CPS, then your children are getting taken. So would you all like to start and at least educate us on where the stereotype comes from? Because again, y'all have already dismantled that's all social workers do. But where did that come from, and why does it seem like we're stuck there as a community? That's how I would love to start us off today.
Well, I would say a lot of it, honestly, is social workers cannot be afraid of our history. Like, we have to understand that we're fighting for a seat at the table. Like, all of us have probably had an experience where our voice was not heard or appreciated because of the history. Prior to, I call her my homegirl, Virginia Satire, that was like, yo, we got to do better than just throwing people into asylums. Like, we really got to look at the systematic structures of the world around individuals. Prior to that, if someone had a mental health issue or we couldn't really deal with them in the society, we just threw them in asylum homes and they got locked in a room. You got pushed a bunch of medication and you stayed there the rest of your life. Your family ain't deal with you no more. You basically was just there. But when Virginia Satire built the field of social work, it was more like, no, like we have to do something different. We have to see that the person themselves is not the problem. It's something in their environment that's impacting their individual system, and we have to change that. But then if we fast forward a little bit more, then you have what was called the New Deal that came out. So one issue that I realized in social work is people be mad at us, but we just following policies that nobody invited us to the table to actually influence. So when the New Deal was created, that's when housing developments were created to help marginalized families be able to rest their head. But then there was a part of the New Deal Act that said a no man in a house rule. And what this rule was, social workers used to be night workers. Why? Because if I can catch you at night when you are not on, when you are asleep, when you're doing whatever you need to do, and if I come in the home and I find that there's anything showing that there's a male in the home, not only was that male kicked out of the home, but so was the mom and the kids. So we wonder why we got baby mama, baby daddy trauma. It's because our history is really into that. So even when we are doing anything related to mental health or social justice, then we're seen as the people that just come and take people's kids, because the policies and procedures surrounding our field reinforce that. And then now that we're kind of past that era, if anybody watches any movies, the first thing a social worker is looked at is, you got Precious that went into the social work room with Mariah Carey, and the only thing she's talking about is what we're going to do with your kid. Like, that's what people see. So if we're able to acknowledge our history, we will acknowledge why it's so important for us to show up in atmospheres like this, to show our professional side, to show that we are way more than just taking people's children, but we can work with the military, we can work with parents, we can work with families, we do therapy, like we do a lot of things. So that's what I would say, as far as someone who is trying to figure out the history and why this conversation is important. Mike or Dr. Davis, you guys have any feedback?
Well, not feedback, but in addition to that, like very often we fall victim to the system, right? Whatever system is already set in place. And so you raised an excellent point in terms of the history of social work in this country, but the history of social work doesn't evolve in a background. And so in our country, the colonizing country that we live in, there's a history of the government coming in and taking Native American children, Mexican children, Hispanic children, but primarily Native American children, and taking them from their families, bringing them into white homes, changing their name, eliminating their religion. So this idea of the government's right, which turned into the government's responsibility for children, actually has its roots in something nefarious in the history of our country. So then when the child is in danger and the child needs to be removed from the home for their safety because of whatever issues that the family has, even when we're doing something good for the safety of the child and for the safety of the community in terms of removing the child from the home and pushing the parents to get whatever counseling and therapy that they need or drug treatment, even then, we're still going to be associated with a negative stereotype of child snatchers, because prior to social work in our country, it was the norm for children of other cultures who didn't fit the norm of white culture to be snatched out of the home. So in our country, there's a history of doing this to the detriment of the child, to the detriment of non-white communities. And so we know that we're over policed, we're over warehoused, we're over diagnosed for whatever treatment that there is, we're over suspended. And then with us remaining only 13% of the population after all of these years, then we're going to be over involved, both not only in the justice system, but in the social services system. So in our community, it's going to be a negative stigma with anything that's associated with government intervention, because government intervention on our behalf traditionally has not been for our benefit. So it's not just a social work thing, it's a systems thing. And that's why the stereotype is so hard to overcome, because you can have a whole generation, the class of 2013 social workers. Between the three of us, we got 15 different jobs, and we're doing well in all of those jobs. And in none of those jobs are we snatching kids from anybody, but that's still going to be the stigma. So if that's the issue in this country for 250, 300 years, then it's not going to be something that we can change with just a few generations of solid social workers like, the ones that we have on here. Dr. Davis, I saw that I cut you off. I apologize.
No worries. So I really love the fact that you mentioned systems, right? So we know, like, being Black and brown people, the systems aren't meant for us. They're meant to disrupt families. They're meant to keep us marginalized. They're meant to oppress us, right? So change has occurred and happened, but it's not happening soon enough. With that being said, I think social media has played a major role in people identifying social workers as kid snatchers, right? When it comes to CPS, and I'm very transparent. Sometimes it depends on the worker that you get, right? That determines on whether or not a child is removed from the home. But I've also worked closely with CPS workers, and ultimately the end goal is to keep families together. But what I've seen is there's a lack of cultural sensitivity when it comes to families, whether it be Native American families, African American families. So some of the things that may be considered a red flag or considered unsafe may be the norm. So for instance, within the Spanish culture, it's not unheard of for multiple people to be living in a house and it's not enough bedrooms. Like, to me, sometimes that could be the culture. The family wants to stay together and be a unit. The way that it works, their saving systems, saving money, all of those things work together for the family. And so these systems come in and judge and say, oh, this is not safe. Or sometimes this is like, the people that are making these decisions are not the people who are impacted. And that really is my issue. There is a slogan or a phrase that is nothing about us without us. And I really stand firm with that not even just that slogan, but just that practice. Like, more people who are affected need to have a seat at the table about the decisions that impact them. And I think until we have more people sitting at the table that have lived experiences, then we're going to continue to have these issues.
Go ahead, baby.
Now, I was going to say that it actually really sets up kind of the trajectory of where we're going next. Because one thing I've seen and heard was the system is very systemic. Whereas it's kind of twofold. One, do you feel that the system has set you all up for failure, especially as it pertains to what you do in social work, and going against the grain? Because again, you're fighting against years and years and years of preconceived notions. But with that also, obviously social work is something that you can't be taught. You got to be born with it, is what I'm kind of getting. You have the book work, but then there also must be an art side. You disagree?
I disagree.
Help me out. Let's converse.
And so I disagree because I don't know, I'm looking at it from different perspectives. I may not, how can I explain it? I think the skill set of a social worker can be taught, but there are certain character traits and qualities that that person has to have. So you have to respect the dignity and the worth of all people, right? You also have to be a compassionate person. You have to value human perspectives, human relationships. You also have to be able to value like people's right to self-determination. And I think a lot of these systems don't value people's rights to self-determination. And so a good social worker is comprised of someone who's taught clinically, who's taught through education, as well as field work, hands-on experience. And of course, lived experience is always going to over trump, this is my personal opinion, all of the above. But I do think a social worker can be taught, but it depends on your qualities, your ideologies, your character traits. The teaching is just the extra oomph on top.
I definitely would say I agree. You know, for me, it's more of you really have to understand that when it comes to social workers, like Les or Dr. Davis said, the character traits of a social worker, that's what you're born with. And I say that because we have core values that we have to follow. And if those aren't your natural core values, like service, dignity and worth of a person, we have human relationships, or like the importance of human relationships. We have different values that we live by. And if that is not into it, then what we can do is kind of shift and change that. Is being able to bring you to the table. Because right now what is happening is, and let's do this because we got some live stuff. Chad King, we are not ignoring you, my friend. One thing when it comes to social work, and the reason why we're actually doing this podcast, and normally I don't address it, but I do because I want you to know we do see your comments, is we're trying to dismantle the image that you have. Because if you're thinking that all we do is take kids from homes or trying to dismantle families, we are up here trying to show our heart to say, like, yes, there is CPS that exists, but all social workers don't work in CPS. Like, I'm a whole therapist out in these streets. Like, you know, I make sure that I help kids not be placed out of the home. So I send counselors in the home to actually work with the families to keep the families united. So I don't want you to think that we're ignoring you. I think for us, it's really trying to take the time to educate so that you can see, okay, yeah, you may have that image, and that might be some social workers. I'm not going to take that away from people. I know some bad colleagues, y'all, you know, but that's what makes this conversation so important, because there are people out here like Dr. Davis, like Mike and myself, that really want to assist people. But again, if the mindset is everyone is capped in this thing. So for example, let's say if you have one Black dad that's a horrible father, and you say, well, every Black dad is a horrible father because that one person that you know, it does a disservice to the actual field. So I think tonight what we're really trying to offer off is that at the end of the day, you got to be passionate. Like the same way we're viewing these comments and we're, you know, answering it live, we get this every single day when we come to the table. Like I remember being a dialysis social worker and we had interdisciplinary teams. My voice was the last one they wanted to hear. But guess what? That dialysis unit could not be open without a social worker, because insurance understand that they need somebody that's going to see a person more than a number. They need somebody that's going to see someone more than a diet or more than a statistic. So our voices really matter. And I think for me, it's more of if we can acknowledge that professional self, the things that we learn and that we teach, another competency that we have is to be competent. Like I can't work with nobody with ADHD because that's not my specialty. I don't do CPS work because that's not my specialty. But when it comes to trauma and PTSD and people that's dealing with traumatic experiences, then that's my lane. So I think to answer your question, Coach G, is we have to know what our lane is. And sometimes as social workers, we may, you know, dabble in different topics or different industries and realize that's not what we want to be. But essentially, we take that with us, if that makes sense. Mike, you got something you want to share, Keith?
Yeah, I want to say this, that like one of part of the problem is a branding problem, right? Because we have a social work code of ethics that a great many of us live by. And my number one on there is the dignity and worth of a person, right? I may be misquoting it because I haven't seen it in a minute, but the dignity and worth of a person. But another thing that we have to see, and Luna, you alluded to this, is one person's experience, though lived experience and real experience, is not a large enough representative sample of all experiences. And so if you have this horrible experience with the police, if you have this horrible experience with the courts, if you have this horrible experience with CPS, if you're a trauma survivor like many of the people that we work with, that does not represent all experiences. It just represents real experience. And so then it is up to us to live out our code of ethics in a way that's beneficial to people, but we also have to be given the opportunity to do that. So I'm not really big on being judged by the actions of others. That doesn't fly with me. Like I'm accountable for myself and my actions as a social worker, as a father, as a minister, but I in no way dismiss the lived experiences of someone else. And so as social workers, the work that we do, it should speak for itself. And then if somebody has a negative experience, then we should be mindful of that. And then we ought to do what we're supposed to do to make sure that the effects of that experience is mitigated for that person. And then the risks to somebody else is minimalized. I'll give you a case in point. So I deal with, give me one sec, Doc. I deal with depression. So we talk about like our staying in our lane. So I deal with depression, right? My skill set allows me to work with other people with depression. My skill set also allows me to go into the home of parents who deal with depression, whose children have issues that will cause them to be placed out of the home. My skill set helps me to prevent that out of home placement. So the work that I do prevents, in some way or another, CPS from coming into the home and taking the child out of the home. Now, that may not be everybody's experience, but the work that we do ought not be discounted because of somebody else's experience, especially when the work that we do, especially the three of us on here with our 15 jobs, is specifically focused on making sure that the person that we deal with is one less person that has to deal with the issue that they are. I saw you, Doc. Go ahead.
So I want to, Chad, I think you mentioned CPS not involving the parents and seeing the father or the male figure involved as guilty. And so I really want to acknowledge that, because historically CPS has not involved the parents. There has been efforts to involve the parents even more now. Like that's one of the goals, to increase parent involvement, right? And keep families intact. No system is perfect. One thing I am seeing more so of now are fathers getting custody of their children and rights being taken away from inadequate mothers. I'm seeing more, I'm a data person, I'm seeing more of that occurring, and fathers having more of a seat at the table. Historically, you are absolutely right. That has not been the case, especially for the male, especially for Black and brown males. And part of that, we know historically, is to keep Black and brown families broken up. But I'm going to stop there.
Hold on, you
No,
muted.
I love that.
Go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, I love that because it really speaks to the individualized path, that each one of you are taking. Again, not allowing history to dictate, what it is that you're doing. So I have kind of a quote, and it's something that I heard about a week ago, and I really think this really captures where it is that we all are. The quote says, "It's not always what's wrong with you. Sometimes it's what happened to you." Because again, we start then responding, body responds based off of what has happened. And I know, what you do a lot of times, you're entering into people's space. You're entering into these experiences, these situations. Without getting too personal, have you all had to have those reality check moments, even day by day with your individual clientele, and be like, okay, it's not what's wrong with you, but something happened to you. Let's see how we're going to work through this. Is that something that you all have experienced in your time?
Go ahead, Dr. Davis.
So I think this is something that I experience on a daily basis. And I also just want to highlight, I think someone mentioned this briefly before, just like the overdiagnosing of specific populations. And so, a lot of times I have to talk to my patients, I have to talk to my clients, and I'm like, this right here is situational. Let's see how we can work through this. I've also left jobs because they wanted to force me to give someone a diagnosis. And I'm like, they're just going through some things right now. Like, anyone would respond in this manner. I'm not here to overdiagnose anyone and place a label on anyone if a diagnosis is not appropriate. And I think reality is people go through things at different phases in life, and it does not always require a diagnosis. Sometimes shit just happens in life, and you need a little extra support to get through it.
Yeah. So
Excuse my language.
You're dead on. I appreciate your insight on that. So one of the things that Chad talked about is that the system seems to be biased, towards women or against men. Can someone address that, and also talk about if there is a system in place to hold social workers accountable when they do make mistakes?
So I think Dr. Davis kind of answered on this just a little bit. Structural wise and historic wise, we didn't always give men a voice, especially not in our Black and Brown communities. But I do think that now that we understand that, we're getting people that are having programs for fatherhood like Mike Jones do on a daily basis, giving a voice to men to say, hey, like, I have a say. Or for me, I have what is called supervised visitation. So if there is some custody issues while you guys are trying to figure it out, we open up a safe environment for people to actually come in and see their kid in a safe environment where they can continue to be able to see their child. So I think right now we are trying to shift in a more direction where we realize not everybody's voice has been heard. We really need to understand that there are so many things that go against us as people in general. Let's take social work out there, right? It literally is. There's so many things that people are experiencing that we are trying our best to come to the table. Like for me, I definitely get it. People have had bad experiences with social workers, bad experiences with, environments that's supposed to be helping you, but it's not. But it's radicals like myself and Dr. Davis and Mike Jones, like me, I'm jumping into full-time entrepreneurship so that I can change people's experience. So I want people to understand that there are social workers who really do care, that want to make a difference, that want to make a change, that do understand that we have not always given everybody a voice, but we're trying our best to do that. Now, how do we hold ourselves accountable? We have a whole code of ethics. If you ever have a bad experience, you can always call our compliance line and you can make a report and they will handle it according to our code of ethics. So a lot of times people don't know that either. Like they may sign, different documents when they first come to an actual service, but typically in that document, it will say like, if you ever have a complaint or if you want to, say that something has happened, you can file that complaint. And then also a part of social work is continuous supervision. Like Leslie and myself, we're both LCSWs, but I'm pretty sure we still have a supervisor or somebody that we can consult with just to make sure that we're good, because there's a thing that's called countertransference and transference. Both the client and the clinician is going to bring their own stuff. Like, for example, what makes me a good clinician is I'm able to marry my expertise with my actual experience. So for me, I'm working with people who had trauma because I've had trauma. I'm working with individuals that deal with depression because I deal with depression, and I'm able to actually work through that and function through that space. So we do a really great job of holding ourselves accountable. These are my group. If we have anything, we'll come like, hey, this is what's going on. Let me consult with you. So it's honestly just about us holding ourselves accountable to the field of social work and going beyond the field of social work and realizing that our main purpose is to really help people heal and get better. Go ahead, Dr. Davis.
So I just want to throw this out there. As we previously stated, like, no system is perfect. I've seen great success stories with CPS. I've seen children that actually needed to be removed from homes because it was unsafe for them, right? But no system is perfect and systems are flawed. Chad, I mentioned before, nothing about us without us. I challenge you to see if you can sit on a board, let your voice be heard, because your feelings are valid. Your experience also can assist with policy change and structures, but it has to start somewhere. And so I challenge you to maybe reach out to local systems and see how you can assist and kind of give some feedback on structures and policies and different systems, because every little bit helps. Like, not reaching out and being a part, like, that doesn't help the situation. And you're very passionate about this, and I definitely think that you could help create the change that you actually want to see.
Mike, did you want to jump in on that? I know we got a really dope comment down there that we just pulled up, if you wanted to address that one.
Yeah, not only that one, but I also saw one that had a question about social work in the pandemic. There is definitely social work is in the helping profession. Like, the profession itself it's the helping profession. It's in the human services field. And there are a plethora of career opportunities in the field of social work. It's so dynamic. I mean, you can be an art therapist as a social worker. You can be an animal therapist as a social worker. You can be a dramatist as a social worker. You can be a mentor, a licensed clinical social worker, have your DSW, PhD in social work. And the idea is to continually gather knowledge about the systems that affect people in a very real way, and challenge those views to the betterment of the community. And so I saw one on the screen saying that CPS served an excellent purpose in terms of removing a child out of a home where the person had substance abuse issues. Like, those are definitely the situations where, if I was a social work CPS worker, I would definitely want the child to be removed out of the home, not only for the child, but also for the family, because it's difficult being a parent. It's difficult being a parent when you don't have issues, when you're not having substance abuse issues, when you're not impoverished, when you're not in a domestic violence relationship. Those things in a normal family, it's hard enough. And so if you have substance abuse issues, typically there's been some trauma involved. And so we want somebody like a social worker who understands trauma-informed care. We want them to be the CPS worker, because you don't have to have a social work degree to do CPS. You can have you can have a human services degree, which is not the same thing. You can have a psychology degree, which is not the same thing. In some places, you can have a criminal justice degree, which is not the same thing. We are trained, education, minimum of 4 years of education, so that we can challenge and we can disrupt systems. And so we want to make sure that families are whole, and they also have reunification. We want the child to be safe, but we want the parent to get help. And you want a social worker, somebody like Dr. Davis, who understands the importance of compassion and not overdiagnosing. We want somebody like Luna, who has both the experience with trauma, but also the trauma training, to be that voice for the family, that's helping them get the resources so that the family can be unified. Like, all of that comes from our social work training and our adherence to the code of ethics. And so I'm glad that I guess it says Nell's View had that positive experience. And I hope that we can have many more positive experiences like that with social workers in our community.
Okay.
So, Peggy, I see you over there, girl. Let's talk about this pandemic. Social work in a pandemic. Working in a hospital setting during the pandemic was very taxing. I saw an increase of substance abuse, an increase of self-harm, suicidal attempts, and working long hours. On top of that, through the world, I was deemed essential, but at one point I had to work every other week without pay. So I think just being transparent during the pandemic, my mood changed. I was irritable. My coworkers and I were like, what in the world is going on? And then we were just like, come on now, listen, we have some things going on. So work from the hospital setting, and then this is when we had to have like the cards to travel after hours, after curfew, and come straight home. Moods fluctuating, a little bit of depression, anxiety. It also, when you're listening to people's experiences and trauma daily, that's taxing on you within itself. So they always say every good therapist have a therapist. So I had a therapist because, just in general, the pandemic, that anyone without a history of mental health, the pandemic in general can take a toll on you. And so for me, I still think I'm still trying to get into the groove of we can go outside and we can be a little bit more social, but the pandemic was very taxing for me as a clinician.
I want to make sure that we address Nell's comment in its entirety, because I think it's great for us to kind of just read it out. I know we touched on it, but she says, personally, I have a positive outlook on CPS because they intervened when I was a child because my mom was unfit to raise us during her drug addiction. However, they made an effort to make sure we were placed with our family, and when my mother recovered, when my mother recovered and we were reunited with our mother. When I am working hand in hand with CPS workers, especially doing community-based work as an intensive in-home director, our main thing is reunification. Like if you talk to any of the CPS workers, whether good or bad, their main goal is to keep the family, together. So they try to find, kin, they try to find close friends that the kid has been around. And it kind of goes back to the pandemic. So with my current role, it has really impacted because our work was done 100% in the home. But then when the pandemic hit, they went to virtual and then they went back into the home, so that transition was very challenging. So we lost a lot of good clinicians because, the families was catching COVID, our clinicians was catching COVID. And it's very stressful as someone who's actually in leadership. And I've had different roles during the pandemic. I started out being a dialysis social worker, and we were basically on call all the time. Like we were the one that was checking clients in, we were the one that was making sure if the testing to be done, it was done. You went from hugging your clients to make sure that they feel good to the same client saying, oh, don't touch me, and that was an experience all by itself. And then for me, it was just really just dealing with my own stuff. Like the pandemic made us all sit down and deal with our own things. No matter what role or job you had to realize that my shit stink too, and we had to deal with that on top of still showing up. And I don't know about you, but I think the pandemic made work life a little worse because now they realize, oh, you can be home and you can work. Like, so now we're always on. There's never a break. If you sick, they say, well, do it sick at your computer. So I just think the pandemic kind of opened up a different level that has hindered us from having a work-life balance. And I do know that we're about to wrap this up, but I want to make sure that Mike has an opportunity to share how his experience has been during the pandemic.
So I had a couple of jobs where I was dealing with people. I'll make this real brief. I see the time. Like I worked at a psychiatric hospital during the pandemic. And I worked at a psychiatric hospital during the pandemic while my mom had cancer, while everybody in the hospital, the patients, the doctors, the nurses, they were all catching COVID. And I ended up having to quit the job because they wanted me to work on the ward with known COVID patients when I had to go home and take care of my mom. So it affected my employment. I worked in the rehousing program in the city of Norfolk during COVID. So I'm like Dr. Davis, I'm an essential worker, and I got to be out there in these streets trying to find housing when COVID made it so nobody was moving and nobody was getting put out for not paying bills. So I have to do my job, and it's made twice as hard. And every time that I'm quote unquote not successful, it's a blemish on my professional record. It's a risk to my mom and my children's health. I'm a father of 3 children who are school age during the pandemic. So my preschooler lost all her best friends as soon as she started school, right? Her favorite teacher was her first teacher. That's trauma for the child. And I have to figure out how to parent understanding trauma and having the science and education of trauma while my 4 and 5-year-old is crying because she misses her friends. And I think that's the other thing that people forget is that social workers are people too. We're husbands, we're wives, we're sons, we're daughters, we're friends, we're mothers. And I'm going to say this with respect, to your audience. Like, some of the stuff that we do sometimes in our dealing with other professionals is counterproductive. Like, it's counterproductive. Like, if we want to get the job done, then we need to behave in a manner that is conducive to getting the work done. And sometimes it's our attitude, sometimes it's our behavior, sometimes it's our reputation. And we're already dealing with a system that sees us as thugs and animals and all this other stuff. And so we really want to be careful, just like social workers, the 3 of us, we don't want to feed into the negative stereotype of social workers. Then we ought to be mindful of our comments and our behavior and our actions, because that feeds into a stereotype that makes people less willing to help us. And that's something that we ought to be mindful of.
Absolutely. So we're going to go to a brief commercial break. And when we come back, I want you guys to be prepared to share your last comments and what you want to leave with the world as it relates to who we are as social workers.
M Green Enterprises LLC, the home of Malira Green, your confidence coach. Malira Green is a licensed clinical social worker who serves as a psychotherapist, Reiki master, and transformative speaker. She is striving to provide the world with preventative services to lower the number of individuals in mental health facilities while helping people grow from a caterpillar to a butterfly. Malira is ready to help the humans of the world find their best selves. Please be sure to check out www.maliratransforms.com because Malira is ready to transform with you.
Malira Transforms. I'm telling y'all, all the services that you need, whether that be Reiki, whether that be for speaking engagement, whether that be for life coach, you name it. Malira Transform provides it all. Located in Hampton Roads, Virginia, but she's also available via email through social media platforms. So reach out to her. On the show, she's known as Luna. So you all have been getting a dose of her the whole evening. But definitely reach out. She's definitely here to assist. Y'all have been doing your thing. This is where I want to flip it because we still got a few minutes. I want to highlight some of the positivity, some of the positive things. I know specifically, Luna, social work has shown you a lot of the world. You have gone into the prison systems and worked in the prisons. You've gone again, renal social work, dealing with kidney health. I would love to just go around and see where social work has taken you, but also where you would love to go in your career next as well.
Ooh, I feel obligated to go first because you already put me out in these streets. But as far as social work, I started out as a foster care intake worker. And in that space, I did see some of the negative impact of CPS. Like, for example, it was something where it was an individual who the family could not get their house cleaned appropriately. So the kids had to be taken out of the home. And I remember having to advocate for the kids and for the parents and say, hey, instead of taking the kids out of the home, why don't we try to give them actual, non-hurting services so somebody can come in and reorganize the home and then we can teach them how to redo it. So for me, it was very important in that space. I've done community-based work, so that's intensive in-home for youth who's at risk of out-of-home placement. I've done mental health skill building, those for those individuals that may have had like a severe mental illness, so like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. And one thing about me that you will learn is I love dealing with individuals with psychosis. I actually was a clinician for about a year for that specific diagnosis, because I realized that our negative mindset behind it actually correlates to your clairs. So when you're talking about spirituality, especially in the Hispanic culture, they deal with mental health on a spiritual level. So when we're dealing with clients with psychosis, we got to understand that the same exact experiences that they have also are clairs in the spiritual life. So some of the things that we are enhanced is not a negative thing, but it's being able to treat that. I've done substance abuse treatment as a case manager, as an actual clinician as well. I've created the Adolescent Community Reinforcement Approach program at a local community services board. I've done groups when it comes to keeping kids from being pregnant. Like I said, I've worked in corrections. I'm now a director. I train, I teach, I'm a therapist. I do a lot of things. But where I want to go in the field of social work is I want to train clinicians on how to be good clinicians. Just like Dr. Davis says, you have to have a character to be a clinician, but with the character of being a clinician, there are certain competencies that we just don't get in our field because it's such a need for us. Once you get a degree or a certification, you're thrown into those jobs. And I want to make sure that these individuals are actually getting properly trained. So I would love to do more speaking on the role of mental health in life in general. I want to be an adjunct professor for one of the schools of social work. And I just want to literally just help people become the best version of themselves. So that's a little bit about what I've done in the field of social work and where I'm trying to go with it.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Dr. Davis, you mind taking next?
Well, first, let me start off with I have to shout out my late grandfather. I feel like I was a social worker before I even knew it. Growing up, my grandfather just helped everybody. He didn't see race, he didn't see age, he didn't see, whether or not you were a substance abuse user. He didn't judge people. He just helped people out wherever he could, and he took me on ride-alongs, whether it be dropping off food, visiting people in the nursing home, also sending care packages to the jail. And so, all that stuff rubbed off on me, as well as having a mother who was a sex worker, who also is a felon, who also has a history of substance abuse. My childhood experiences really shaped and formed the social worker that I am today. And so as far as for the future, I definitely want to continue with policy reform, policy change. My specialties really are program development, as well as curriculum development and program evaluation. And like I said, policy change, policy reform. In the past, I have co-designed a sex worker diversion program curriculum, as well as a reentry curriculum. I've worked in the prisons. I've worked with homeless populations. I specialize in trauma, personality disorders, but policy change is key. And I really want to highlight that because we've really centered a lot of conversation around CPS. And once again, as social workers, we do so much more. And what I love about our field is we're not stuck to one thing. A lot of different professions are stuck to one thing. We can work in a hospital, we can do CPS, we can work under a lawmaker, we can do everything. And so, like I said, policy reform, reproductive justice, sex worker rights, harm reduction, that's what I'm passionate about. Anything that disrupts systems. I'm here to challenge people, and I'm not afraid to do it. So, Chad, I like you being vocal. I like you going against the grain. I like you speaking up. And keep doing it.
Mike.
Beautiful, beautiful. And my brethren, Mike Jones.
All right. So I've had a few jobs in the field. I've done intensive in-home. I worked for a nonprofit organization that was designed to help fathers who are at risk get jobs, learn healthy relationship skills, further their education. I have worked in housing, making sure that people who experience chronic homelessness and have either HIV/AIDS, substance abuse, or serious mental illnesses, that they have housing and that they're able to maintain that housing. I was the first ever behavioral health probation officer for the city of Chesapeake in partnership with Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Care. I did reentry again in fatherhood. I've worked, actually partnered with Luna to develop a curriculum to help female survivors of sexual trauma. Created a peer support group with them. There were 6 women, and out of the 6, 5 of them engaged in therapy and remain in therapeutic services. And that program was designed by a man working with all women under the tutelage of Luna, a very successful program that the nonprofit organization has actually asked us to do again this September. While Luna's working on her PhD, we'll be doing that. I've created scholarship programs to help African American males from Hampton Roads pursue a social work education at Norfolk State University. I'm currently the fatherhood coordinator for EVMS, working with the Virginia Department of Health, and then I have my own tutoring and mentoring service. Where do I see myself in the future? 2 things I want to do. Number 1, I want to make my mom proud. And number 2, I'll be getting, God willing, my Master's of Divinity in May. I should be graduating from the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University. And what I see myself doing is wedding social justice and ministry together, because Jesus was a social justice advocate. And so I want to live my life in a manner, 1, that pleases my mom, and 2, that pleases God. And 3, that uplifts my people, and then 4, uplifts all people. So that's what you can expect to see me doing in the future, because I'm already doing it now. Social workers are more than CPS workers. CPS work is social work, but social work is more than CPS work. So that's what
Hey,
I
Mike,
do.
can you say again? You said Jesus is a what?
Jesus was I don't know what I said. What did I say? Jesus was a
Like a
social justice
social advocate.
advocate.
Yeah,
Jesus was
yeah.
a social justice advocate in a time where women and children were despised and treated like property. Jesus said, "Blessed are the little children." He spoke to women. He called women the daughter of Abraham, women that had no name. He loosed women from their infirmities. He dealt with the Samaritans and the Greeks, even though his Jewish brothers and sisters didn't want to have anything to do with them. And so I try to live my life that way.
Woo. Before Coach
Beautiful,
G jumps
beautiful.
on real quick, I just want to just acknowledge one thing, y'all. And I'm gonna go on a really brief tangent, just a little teeny bit. If you find yourself always having to debate, then you don't know your shit. And I'm not trying to be mean or rude or none of that. But if you come into a space, we have to be willing to learn. And as we're reading comments, I know we're all going to walk away with this learning, like, hey, how can we better the system? How can we better do certain things? But if it comes to a space where we're always trying to debate, then that's not going to help humanity. That's bigger than social work. That's just humankind. So I just ask that as we're trying to better humanity, whether it's as a social worker, as a minister, or as a person, if we're coming into the space already ready to debate, then we're not open to learning from it. And then both parties end up missing the beauty that each person is trying to provide. So that's one thing I would ask, the only way that we can build our actual field, the only way we can change the image of social work is if when we're coming to the table, people have an open mind to see us in a different light. So that's all I want to end us with. That's Luna being nice today. But go ahead, Coach G. What you got to say to close us out, King?
Peace, yeah. As the one of the few non-social workers here, I want to say salute you all for what you do. And this is kind of a self-reflective moment. I can rest assure you, especially to the world watching, the 3 social workers here at some point in their journey probably had an interaction with a social worker that probably put them on the right path, that kind of put them on the way, that changed their trajectory or put something in their light. And the reality is, with the greatest help from the greatest social worker, without the ability or knowingness or awareness to heal individually, that greatness of the social worker would not have worked. That the credentials could be there, but if you do not want to heal, if you do not want to take them steps and say, there must be better, doesn't matter who you work with. Mike Jones referenced one of the greatest prophets, Jesus Christ, JC. But Mike Jones could also tell you anytime prior to a healing, he asked the person he was going to heal, do you believe this can happen? And, based on that person's response was what was needed for the healings to take place. And I feel that goes the same way for our social workers, in what you all do. It's pointless if the person that you're working with does not even believe, that better can happen for them. Otherwise, they'll find themselves, in that revolving door. So it begins with yourself. Once self realizes better is available, then that help will come. So thank y'all. I want to thank you. Reach out for help, y'all. Reach out. Social workers is here. They're not going nowhere. In fact, they're getting more innovative as the days go by. So that which you need, trust and believe. The universe has a social worker for you, and they're not here to judge. In fact, they're actually here to help. And my desire is today's show, today's podcast, gave a glimpse, gave some hope, and realized that you can reach out. Go against the stigma, realize social workers are more than CPS. So thank y'all. Please like, share, subscribe. How can we reach you all? Lona, we'll start with you. We'll go around. Just let us know how we can reach you.
Absolutely. So I am Myra Green on Facebook, but on Instagram, I'm Myra Transforms. You can find out what I'm up to at www.myratransforms.com. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that 3 of us on the screen will be doing Building Bosses in May. And then also myself and Mike Jones will be doing a reentry program in April. So we are really excited about that. But that's where you can find me. And you can also do info@myratransforms.com. If you just want to send me a quick email, I'll be willing to assist you and help. Dr. Davis?
I have to get myself together. Currently, I am unreachable at this time.
Okay. Gotcha.
Know your limits. Part of life
that
is
is
knowing
a
your
safe
limits.
place to be, Doc.
know your limits, and I know mine. So I'm currently unreachable.
And I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm like, call me, text me, hit me on Facebook, hit me on Messenger, Instagram. But the best way to reach me so I don't get in no trouble is hampton.rhodes.legacy@gmail.com. So that we can get this tutoring and this mentoring and this social justice work done. And we out here trying to raise money for these kids to go to college, pay for these college books, trying to make sure that these women that have experienced sexual trauma, that they have some health and some healing. So yeah, you can reach me, hampton.rose.legacy@gmail.com, and Michael L. Jones, probably senior BSW on Facebook, but I'm not with the shits on Facebook. I'm not with it. I'm not with foolishness. So don't let this collar fool you.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, we are still human.
Gary, Indiana.
We're
That's how we roll.
But
yeah,
we're still human and transparent.
And my pastor from Portsmouth. So if I go off a little bit, he'll understand. He'll understand it better by and by.
Hey, I'll just say, I've been, real quiet, letting the experts speak, man. And I'm telling you, I appreciate what you do. Like you said earlier, a number of you said that with everything, there are some bad apples, just part of it. But I can tell you from listening to you all, you're doing what you do, not for the money, but for the love and for the passion to serve people. So I thank God for y'all. Keep doing what you're doing. It's not easy. You're going to always run against opposition, but if there's purpose behind what you're doing, I know you keep pushing and keep doing great things. So thank you too for joining the show, and I tell everybody, I hope you come back.
Absolutely. Let's go out to this outro.
I'm writing this, try not to cry. You stabilize my environment, inspired when you had my eye. My youth was consumed by vain beauty. Little did I know that vanity could masquerade the unruly. Coolly high love times, we reminisce, paint a vivid picture.
Roster come and lift her.
Brethren, I don't want to see another sister get left up, creep by another mister. Patience, no longer taking advantage of your innocence. Genetically superior, I had the vision is. Head ruled up my eye, I'm on my pilgrimage. History richer than the epic of Gilgamesh. We projected our broken worlds, made you a victim. Change the narrative, let us sit at your feet for wisdom. Pride, disrespect, I played my part. Now I apologize, cause deep down it hurt my heart.
To the queens lost in the struggle. Part of the chain gang. Great honor to.
Yes, we did it. We did it. This was the Culture Podcast. We will be back in 2 weeks. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. We are on YouTube on the Floor is Yours podcast. And the Culture Podcast is always about opening up the door to this house. We are airing out secrets. We are talking about our culture, and we are building communities. So until next time, I want to thank Dr. Davis and Minister Mike Jones for coming up here and just allowing us to do this thing. Now, listen, before we go off, we have something special for you guys. So a couple weeks ago, we did the Love Letter Part 1 to women. We had 4 amazing Black men come on and just share their hearts and their thoughts in their mind about how they truly do love our Black women, in particular for Women's Month. So on the 29th at 8 o'clock, we're going to be doing a part 2 of this discussion to talk about now, how can we as women love on our Black men as a response to the letter that they gave us a couple weeks ago. So make sure you be on the lookout for that. We're going to make sure we put our flyers out on all platforms because we're in the business of healing, y'all. It is time for us to heal our community. It's time for us to bring our families together and support one another. But until next time, we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Peace.